Okay. Kumland and a block tomorrow. Today's block is Daf Yud Amud Aleph. Let's begin from the Mishnah of Tessa Beis on the bottom. We're continuing with the theme of Ein Bain. So the last thing we learned was about the difference between the times when there was when there was no Beis Hamikdash. There was a Bamba Gedela in Noiva and in Givoy, and then there was a Bamba Ktan in the backyards. And what the difference was, what karbanos you can bring on them. Now we're continuing discussing the Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash. So we learned Ein Bein Shiloi Yerushalayim. There's no difference between Shiloi, which was the Mishkan, and Yerushalayim. Anyone that can see, as long as you can see Shiloi, you can eat there your carbon shlamim, for example, your carbon taida, and or Maisa Sheni, and Yerushalayim, it's to do with the wall. And in both places, kochim like carbon chatas, and eaten by the kohen, can only be eaten inside the Beis Hamikdash, or inside the curtains by the Mishkan, or inside the walls by the Beis Hamikdash. Another difference is kedusha shila yesh acharei heter. When Shila was destroyed, bombers became permitted again, and but kedusha shalayim, once Shalayim was built, ein acharei heter. There's no use afterwards of bombers. Says the Gemara. Shimon HaTzadik had a son, and he built a Beis Hamikdash in Mitzrayim. A large populace lived in Mitzrayim, and he built the Beis Hamikdash there. And we'll have a Gemara Menach. There's a big argument whether it was built L'Shem Shemayim or was it actually built in for Avodah Zarah. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak and Kohanim who worked there were penalized; they couldn't come back and work in the Beis Hamikdash. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said, "Shemaiti, I heard." And even though there's a general rule that when you go into Chutz La'aretz, the offer, the dirt, makes it tamei. So Teish already explains that, but as far as the Beis Hamikdash Chayna was concerned, if it was was built for the right reasons, they did not apply the laws of Tumah of Eretz Amim, the nation of the world. So Amri Yisrael said, "Shemaiti, I heard, Shemakrivin the Beis Chaynav, that you can be makriv in the mizbeach of this place called Beis Chaynav, the building Beis Hamikdash of Beis Chaynav, and Bizman Hazeh, today, you're allowed to, which some of them unfortunately have a hard time understanding. Beis Chaynav did not exist in the times of Rabbi Yitzchak. You know, it was destroyed a long time earlier. But anyway, Ksavar, he held that Beis Chaynav lav Beis Avodah Zarah. He held it wasn't Avodah Zarah at all. He held that it was built for the right reason, so therefore you can continue using it. Says the Gemara, the Kasava, but he holds further. Kedusha l'shaita, kitcha l'shaita, v'lei kitcha l'salavai. He holds that Yerushalayim is no longer a sacred place, and he holds that now Yerushalayim is destroyed. You're permitted to use bombas again, and like if a kitcha l'salavai after it was destroyed. The Chesiv says, "Kilei bosam ad ato." You didn't come until now. Elamanucha v'lanachla. You didn't come now yet to the place of rest and to the place of inheritance. Menucha, that is Shiloi. That is when you arrive at Shiloi, that's a place of rest. And Nachla is referring to Yerushalayim. So because we're comparing Shiloi to Yerushalayim, and we compare Yerushalayim to Shiloi actually. Makish Nachla Menucha. We compare Yerushalayim, the inheritance, to the place of rest, Shiloi. Just like everyone agrees in Shiloi, after it was destroyed, after you were allowed to, after they moved out, you're allowed to use the bombas again. The same thing with Yerushalayim, you can use the bombas again. That's what he believes. So therefore, he says today you cannot bring Yerushalayim, but you could bring in Beis Chaynav, as if the Beis Chaynav still existed in his time. To tell you, some say it's problematic. Amrulay. So they said to him, Amarta, did you actually say that? Amalullah, no, he changed his mind and he stepped back and he said, no, I didn't. Amar Rava, what do you mean you didn't? He'll keep, I swear, Amar, you said it. The Gemin Laman, I myself heard it from you. So we're talking now in times of Rava, and as if to say the Beis Chaynav still existed in those times. Well, my time at Kahad the Beis, so why did, if he said it, why did he step back? So Kasha did Amari, because Amari had a question. The Amari is going to try to prove that Yerushalayim is holy today like it was back then, and the Beis Hamikdash, the site of Beis Hamikdash, holy today was back then. So therefore, Kedusha Shayna is Kitchel Lasulavi. The Moiser Amar was the question. It says in our Mishnah right here, Kedusha Shiloi Yesh Acharei Heter. And the Kedusha Shiloi, there's a Heter afterwards. Kedusha Shalayim ain't achar heter. It says clearly here that the Kedusha Shalayim there's no heter bamas afterwards, and once there's no heter bamas afterwards, so therefore, how could you say that Shalayim no longer holy? Could use bamas? Clearly, in the Mishnah, he can't. So what do you call it? So someone will say, so why Rabbi Yitzchak didn't know this Mishnah? How can you be an Amoid if you don't know Mishnais? But he thought that even though our Mishnah says this, there are other Tanaim that disagree, and he's passing like the other Tanaim. So therefore, he wasn't deterred initially. But later on, he changed his mind. Says Gemara further. So then what he changed his mind was he decided that really nobody's arguing Pilates promise. Even those who hold that the base of meat is no longer holy, they're only arguing whether you can still bring a carbon today. We know that people go, held the Shainim, bring a carbon Pesach, whether you still can bring a carbon today on the site of the Mizbech, is it still holy? But no one says that you can start bringing carbonas again on Bamas. Even those who hold Shalayim is no longer holy, but there's no longer a license to use Bamas, and that's where he changed his mind. Taking about it further, that's one question. Tonight we learn Shalayim, once again, Shalayim, that's Bamas, all the Bamas became Masa. Is no longer any heta for it. And the he hoisel and nachal that became the permanent inheritance. So the Yisrael changed his mind. Says the Gemara, and the Tanoi to Machlekes Tanoi. Now we're going to search for it, see where that Tanaim argue whether Yerushalayim, where the base of Mikdash is still a holy site, whether you can still bring Kabbalas today. And the base of Mikdash. Oh, said, Shemaiti, I heard when they were building the second base of Mikdash. So what they did was Osu Kalayim Lehechel. They built curtains around, the area of the base of Mikdash, and the Kalayim on curtains around. While they're building the wall, they built curtains, and while they're building the courtyard, they built the walls around the courtyard. They also built curtains. Elo, what's the difference in the temple, the base of Mikdash itself, and the courtyard? Behechel in the base of Mikdash itself by Mechutz. They put curtains inside and they built a wall surrounding it. But came to the courtyard all the way around. They built inside and the curtain was on the outside. And Amar will soon see why. Amar Rabbi Shur said, Rabbi Shur disagrees. He said, Shamaki, I heard Shemakrivin. So it seems like they built temporary walls till they built a permanent wall. That's what Rabbi Lezer says. Comes along Rabbi Shur said, I heard Shemakrivin Afa Pisha Erbais. I heard that you can bring in the base of Mikdash even if there's no walls, no temporary walls, no permanent walls. So it sounds like the first one, Rabbi holds you need wall before you can use the base of Mikdash or curtain, something. And Rabbi Shur said you don't need anything. Because they started bringing kabbalah straight away. They didn't wait until the base of Mikdash was fully constructed before they brought kabbalahs. So the mother, I heard Shemakriven Alpha Pisha Ein Bayis Oichlin Kocha Kochim. They would eat Kocha Kochim Alpha Pisha Ein Kalim, even though there's no curtain. In other words, it was still a holy site. Kochim Kalim Sheni Alpha Pisha Ein Chaim, and they ate Kocha Kalim around Yerushalayim. There was no wall. And they should Dusha the Shein, the kitchen of the site, because the site itself was still holy. So here we see that seems to be an argument. They had to build temporary walls first. Seems to learn that it's not holy until you have walls. And Yeshua holds it's still holy even when there's no walls. That's what it appears. Because Rabbi Lezer, since Rabbi Lezer explains himself, and he says the reason why you don't need walls is because the site is still holy, it would appear that Rabbi Lezer argued said they had to build temporary holes, that it wasn't holy until they put up some kind of a temporary walls. Rabbi Lezer saw like it's not holy. How do you know? Perhaps everyone holds Kedusha L'Shoina Kitchel L'Shaita V'Kitchel L'Salova. Maybe everyone agrees that it's a holy site. So how come Rabbi Lezer says that he heard that they actually built temporary walls prior to that? Mar Ma'ideshmi Lekamar Mar Ma'ideshmi. He was telling you a fact, but he heard, not having any implications regarding halacha, whether the site or not. He just heard that they happened to build temporary walls. Maybe there was still a holy site, but they built temporary walls. You can ask me questions. So why did they build temporary walls? Why did they build temporary walls if there's no need for it? Purely for discretion. Purely for discretion. That's all. So therefore, everyone there's no Tanaim here who say clearly, openly that the base of Mikdash site is not holy anymore. Maybe you want to hold it as holy. The only argument is what actually happened historically, and why possibly they built temporary walls for some discretion. Ella, so there's another group of tonight, perhaps. Kihani tonight, the following tonight will argue whether the Beis Hamikdash is holy, even though it's not upstanding or not. The Tanya, the Braisa, Amar Rabbi Shmuel said, but Rabbi Yasi, the son of Rabbi Yasi, Lama Manu Chachamim. Why did the rabbis go ahead and tabulate? As Elu, all of these different cities, because when they went with Ezra back to Eretz Yisrael, Motzos Elu, they found these cities. The Kitchen decided to rededicate them. Abel Rishain is the earlier. There were other cities, but they didn't rededicate those other cities, so they're no longer holy. They're not considered bayis batar chayma, let's say for a walled city beside the house and so on. Abel Rishain is botlu misha botlu aretz. But other cities, since they didn't rededicate it when they went the second time, are no longer holy. Clearly, that the first kedusha didn't continue. The first kedusha when they went to Israel, they sanctified these cities. It wasn't permanent. So that's opinion. So here clearly we heard Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yasi holds that kedusha l'shayna is not l'asi lovely. But I mean, you'll ask you a question. It says another brayso, the same Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yasi, which we're going to have a contradiction. Why only nominate these cities? There were many other cities. It says in the pasuk that they captured all of these cities, and Shishim 60 cities. Kol Chebel Argoy, Ship of Argoy, it says Kol Elu Orim, all of these cities, but they're all fortified with the walls, the volume and the height, and all these cities are holy. So why nominate only a certain amount of cities? All the they found these, and the kitchen, and they made them holy. So you want to ask before we move on. So you're telling me that they found these? You just said that all the cities were holy. Then you tell me they found these and made them holy. Why bother making them holy? They're holy already. Kitchen. You just said a minute ago, you just said a minute ago that all the cities still maintain their kedusha. The initial kedusha still remains. So why these cities that were nominated, they make holy again? They found these. They found these. They counted them. But truth of the matter is, not only these. Any city that you have a tradition, from your ancestors, that had a wall once upon a time, is kol ha-mitzvahs halalu. All of these mitzvahs that have to do with bate or chayma, like if you sell a house 1 year to redeem it and then you lose it, or let's say that a mitzvah has to be sent out, or reading a Megilah if it has a wall around it from dating back to Yeshua ben Nun. All of these cities, you continue conducting as if there's a wall around it. So this Tana here clearly learns that the original kedusha continues onwards. So the problem is kasha to Rabbi Shmuel. We have a problem. Two Rabbi Shmuels here. So we answered today. Tanoi Rabbi Shmuel. Two Tanim arguments. Rabbi Shmuel said. Some of the other shem in Zvach and other places that talk about is, we're putting all together. There's kedusha of walled cities. There's kedusha of Yerushalayim. There's 3 different levels of kedusha. There's kedusha of walled cities. There's kedusha of Yerushalayim, and there's kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash. Kedusha of walled cities apply to all the dinner we do with walled cities, like we just mentioned, by reading the Megilah, by the Mitzvah, redemption of the house, and so on. Kedusha of Yerushalayim has to do with eating kosher kalim with Ma'aser Sheni. And then there's kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash, which has to do with whether you can bring kabbanis to the mizbeach or you can bring kabbanis today. And does it necessarily follow because you believe, let's say, the Beis Hamikdash kedusha is still continues? That therefore, the kedusha of the walled city also continue. Maybe it's 2 separate machlekes. And yet the Gemara seems here, because we could have answered very simply. The first Rabbi Shmuel we couldn't really answer, but Gemara could have said that what in the world does Rabbi Shmuel have to do with our discussion of Yitzchak of whether the Beis Hamikdash site you can still bring kabbanos on the mizbech, and you bring me a whole story there about Bate Orachayma. Maybe the two are not linked. So clearly that Yitzchak does link it, and that's why he initially followed the Tanoim that said that the first kedusha is no longer holy. But and then later changed his mind. So maybe the reason why he changed his mind is that he felt that maybe that just because they're arguing regarding a walled city doesn't necessarily reflect on what they would hold regarding the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe because of his Mikdash, everyone holds such strong kedusha. That kedusha still continues. It's only the kedusha of the walled cities where these Tanoim are arguing. Anyway, another answer: how can Rabbi Shmuel argue himself? So he said two students arguing what he said, or another answer is Rabbi said, Tan, we learned there's a mistake here, there's an error. It wasn't Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yasi, it was Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yasi. Tan, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yasi, I said the pasuk, that if the year didn't complete, that there's a wall there. Afapi, is written as if not, and you want to say yes. So it's a lamed vav aleph. So we dash an afa pisha ein la achshav loy no. Now it doesn't have, but once upon a time it had. It had before previously. That's good enough. Okay, now we're going to go back to Purim and we're going to start discussing the Megillah. It says in Pavahim Achashverosh starts off the Megillah in the times of Achashverosh. Omar Rabbi Vitem Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi said, and others say Rabbi Yonasan says. We have a tradition from the dating back to the times of Anshik. That's like whenever it says Vayihi, ain't el lashon tzar. It's like Vai. Vai means woe. So Vayihi means that something terrible, ominous. It's an ominous warning. Something terrible is going to happen. What happened? Havi Haman. Haman came on the horizon. He came to times when they were judging the judges, and what happened over there? Havi Rav. It was a famine. In that very pasuk it says Vahi Rav. So again, it's foreboding. Then it says there Vahi kehechel adam right before Noach. Vahi kehechel adam the people began to multiply, and what happened then? Vayah Hashem kiraba rasa adam. How terrible it was. Again, all of these things open up with preface of the word Vayihi. Then it says, for example, Vahi Benosa Mikedem, that the people, this is the Haflaga, they were traveling Mikedem, and then what happened? They decided to build a tower of bubble, and they were punished. Then we have Vahi B'mei Amrafel, came the times of Amrafel, and the story of the four kings, and also Muhammad, they waged a war, and we know what happened there. Then it says Vahi Yeshua was in Yerichai, and the Malach stood in front of him, which we learned about in the beginning of Gimel in the Gemara. And the Malach appeared before him, and with a sword in his hand, and wanted to harm him. Vahi Hashem es Yeshua. Another instance of Vahi Hashem was with Yeshua, and his name spread throughout the world. And then we had the story of Achan, where he plundered from the spoils that Yeshua and his armies took. Vahi Ish Echem and Armasim. We talk about the beginning of Shmuel that Elkanah, one of the people who were Muslim, so it says Vahi again, and what happened then? Chana had to pray because she was barren. Vahi Kizak Shmuel, and it says further when Shmuel became of age, and then the problem was, and he wanted to make his children the leaders. And the next part it says, his children were not up to the task; they didn't go in his ways. So every Vahi leads to some disappointment. Vahi David says David l'chol drachav. David went all his ways. Maskil was intelligent. Hashem was always with him. It's a good thing. And then right after that it says, Vahi Shaul David mahayemu. David Shaul became envious of from that day onwards. Again, you see, it leads into something bad. Then it says Vahi ki yoshav hamelech b'beisiv. David was sitting at home, and he was resting from all his enemies. You think it's a good thing. And then it says that Abishai tells him, by the way, David, good news, you're not going to be able to build the base of Mikdash. Only your son will, Shlomo. So you tell me that every time it says Vahi something ominous, let me ask you a question. It says Vahi Bayam Hashmini. In Parsha Shmini, it starts off Vahi, it was on the 8th day, and they dedicated base of Mikdash. The Mishkan, with Tani, we learned that day was such a joyous, festive day for the Abishai, equal to the day of creation. How do we know that? It says here by when it came to creation, it says so we see that's a good thing. Says Gemara, it's a good thing. What happened then? Who died, passed away on that very day. Okay, I'll give you another example where he seems to be giving good regards. Like, see, it says it was 480 years when Eden left Mitzrayim. And that's when they built the base of Mikdash, and that was the 4th year of his reign. And so it was a good. So we see, but he's a good thing. When it says again, but see, it says that's one question. Question number 2 it says Vahi kasher Yaakov's Rachel, when Yaakov saw Rachel, and then and then he married Rachel. But there's a lot of bad things that happened in the house of Lavan as well. So Gemara could have answered that, but the Gemara continues. And that's a good thing. What about Sheni? Oh, they all begin with Vayihi, and they all are good news stories. Well, you could too, and there's so many other instances. Rashi says, right. Let me modify the statement. Kol vahi, the word vahi itself, ema hachi ve'ema hachi, ika hachi, ika hachi. Sometimes it's like this, sometimes like this. But vahi b'mei, remember how does the Megillah begin? Vahi b'mei achashverosh. But it says vahi b'mei is coming to tell you something ominous. Einu elo lashon tzar. It's a lashon of tzar, and chamisha. There's a total of five vahi b'mei. Five vahi b'mei. Vahi b'mei achashverosh. That's number one. Number two, vahi b'mei shveit hashayftim. When we start off with the hunger, the famine. Then vahi b'mei rafel, the kings, the 4 kings, the 5 kings, and Lot is captured. Vahi b'mei achaz, and then we have it was in the time of the Achaz, the son of Yasim, and when the Melech Haram came, and Pekah and Amalyo to Shalim for wage of war. And then we have Vahi b'mei Yaakov, which began the time of Golus, and Vahi b'mei. And that was 11 years before Tzikio. So we see Vahi b'mei is bad. We have another tradition, by the way, we're talking about kings, that Amitz was Yishaya. Yishaya was a Navi, and his father's name was Amitz, Yishaya ben Amitz. And Amatzia, there was a king called Amatzia, who was the king of Yehuda. You should know, now they were actually brothers. Micah Mashmalan, what's he trying to tell us? Kol Kala. He said that any woman, that is modest in the house of her father-in-law or in-laws, merit that out of her children you will have kings, royalty, and prophets. How do we know? From Tamar herself. We'll see what it says by Yehuda. It says that Yehuda saw her when he saw her on the crossroads. And he assumed that she was a harlot. He kisses up her head because she covered her face. A bit odd, since when the harlots cover their face. Mishum kisa panev yechol zayna, because she covered her face, he decided she was a zayna. What does it mean? Ela mishum the kisa panev is a chaman. Not that she currently covered her face. She covered her face when she was at home. So Yehuda never really knew his daughter-in-law. She always covered her face. She was so modest. Lahabiyadla didn't know. And then eventually he married her. And who were their children? Zachsa v'yotzim and malachim. He had kings, the Nevi'im, and prophets. Who were malachim? Obviously, the kings were David. The kings were from David HaMelech, who came from Peretz. And Nevi'im, and who were the Nevi'im? Must speak with what we just learned. We have a tradition. Amitz, Ba'amatzia, Achim, Amitz and Machir were actually brothers. So and it says, Chazon Yishayahu ben Amitz. So we see that that's coming, descending from Tamar, you have a Navi and you have a Malachi. Talking about Rab Levi, something else we learned in Mariyuma. We have a tradition in our hands from our ancestors that the Aron did not take up any room whatsoever. It didn't take up any room at all. Measured the room, both sides of the Aron to the walls, and it didn't take up any room. And at the same time, it had to meet the exact criteria in the Torah, all the measurements. So the Gemara explained how it works. Tanya, we learned the Aron Moshe had 10 amas of every side, every angle from the Aron, from either side of the Aron to the wall was made of 10 amas. It says the leaf had vir. It says that in front of the vir, the entire room itself was 20 amas. So the room, the cavity of the room, just the room itself, the empty room, took up 20 amas because that was in front of the heichel. And that was what separated the Kodesh and Kodesh Hakadosh. So in that room was 20 amas. And uksi, when it says in the room you had the kruvim, and the kruvim it says that kanaf kruv echad eser amas, that the wing span of each kruv was 10 amas. From one end of the wing to the other end of the other wing, the entire span was 10 amas. The other one, Estan amas. So the kruvim themselves took up 20 amas of the span the room, 20 amas, and where was the Aron? Where in the world was the Aron itself sitting? It must be the whole thing was a miracle, and that's how it was that was the manifestation of the Shekhinah resting in the base of Mikdash. Now we have, like, if you ever look at Medrash Rabbah, it always begins the Parshiyos that they would, as an introduction to the Parsha, they would find a pasuk in Tanakh, and they would say that it alludes to some events in the Parsha. So the Gemara says here, when they started the Parsha, means we started the Pasuk, we start from here. It says the Pasuk, V'kamti aleim, I'll stand up to them, Bichrati lebavel, I'll cut out for Bavel shame. their name, Ushar, and their relatives also say, I mean, the grandchildren, the descendants. Nu Hashem says the Eibishter. So what exactly did he take away? What did he take away from Babel? So Shem, Zaksab, he took away their language. They lost their language and their alphabet, and they had to use other people's alphabets. And She'er, what do you mean they lost their relatives, their Lashon, that they lose their way of communicating. With the relative, you have to communicate. They lost their way of communicating because they lost their language as well. We don't no longer have a Babylonian language. I guess Aramaic is not really the real authentic Babylonian language. Nin, and even in Aramaic itself, you look at Talmud Yerushalmi, it's very different than the Talmud Bavli. The Talmud Bavli Aramaic is much easier to follow than the Talmud Yerushalmi. So there's different degrees of Aramaic. So therefore, it must be talking about some Taisa says we're talking about the language of the royalty. Just like the Talmud Yerushalmi Aramaic definitely is not the same Aramaic, or it's like more like the Talmud Bavli Aramaic is more the vernacular of the people, the common people. The Yerushalmi is more the literary, and Taisa says there was a third level, like the royalty, and that is what was forgotten. I guess you can say like Shakespeare English versus regular English. Nin the Malchus, that they lost their kingdom, and Benechet is again the descendants. That's Vashti. Vashti is a descendant, and we know what happened there. He introduced the Pasha. From elsewhere, it says in the Pasuk, I will replace each thing. Tachas and Natsuz in the place of a Natsuz, which is a thorn tree, is Yala Breish, another kind of tree will grow. The Tachas has Sirpad, and in the place of the Sirpad, Yala Hadas will grow the Hadassim. Sirpad is again another kind of tree as well. So what do you mean? Tachas and Natsuz means Tachas, Haman Rosh, it's alluding to Haman Rosh, Sha'asa Atla Zara. He treated himself like he was some kind of a god, and everybody had to bow down to him. See, when it says Ubechol Hanautzim, Ubechol Hanaholim, that all the different Nautzim, the different kinds of thorn trees, and somehow or another this alludes to Haman Rasha becoming Avodah Zarah. But in place, Yala B'Rosh, what's going to be in his place? Mordechai will take over. The Mordechai Shanika Rosh, B'Rosh is the Rosh of Rosh, the head. Mordechai became superior l'chol hapsamim to all the kind of spices. It says, it says you should take yourself psamim roish, and with murderer and metagmina, the targum of murderer is moredochi. The targum murderer is moredochi. So we see that's Mordechai, and therefore that alludes to what he's a psamim, and he's the head of the psamim, and he will take over from Haman. Tachas Asapin, in the place of Sapin, which is referring to Tachas Vashti Harishah, in the place of Vashti, Bas B'noi Shemacharash, we said before, Nid, she was a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, and according to some, Achashverosh was only a stable hand, but he became royalty because he married to Vashti. Shesoraf Refidas Beis Hashem, it destroyed the house of the Eibishter, or the place where the house of the Eibishter was meant to be. It says Refidasai Zav. The Abish's resting place is gold. Yalla Hadas, and Hadas will take over. Who's that? So Esther Hatzadekis Shunikras Hadassah. She's called Hadassah. So it says that he Oimein es Hadassah. That Mordechai brought up Hadassah. Says the Gemara. So we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the house of Hashem, and Vashti was a granddaughter of hers and was taken over by Esther. Then it says further, Hashem L'Shem, and it'll be today as a name. That's Mikra Megilah. That's all part of the same pasuk. That's talking about reading Megillah. That what Olam, a sign forever. Lo Yechadav never be cut off. Elu Yimei Purim. These are the days of Purim, and that's probably how we learn now that Purim will never be abolished. Even L'Asad Lavai, Purim will never be abolished. Let's go further. So that's how, whenever we start dashing about Megillah Esther, he would start with these psukim here. When he introduced the story of Purim, he started with the following introduction. It says, Hashem Aleichem. The Eibishter wanted to, the Eibishter was happy. The Eibishter was happy about the Eden. They wanted to improve their ways. The Eibishter also, Chas v'Shalom, will be happy when he has to do bad to you. What does that mean? To the Gemara, is able to happy when the Shem Chas Hashem fall apart. Well, see, it says that they go before the army. They say Hoidul Hashem, Kilo Chazde. It says Hoidul Hashem, Kilo Elam Chazde. Don't say Hoidul Hashem, Kitoiv, Kilo Elam Chazde in this particular pasuk. When Yeshua went to fight with Ammon, and they were singing to the Eibishter, even though they were having a difficult time, and they were singing to the Eibishter. But it says Hoidul Hashem Kilon Chazli. What happened to Toiv? Rabbi Yechon ben Malon Kitoiv B'Hoidazu. Why does it say Kitoiv? V'Shelach Baruch Hu Sameach B'Machlos Hashem. The Eibishter is not happy when the Yidden or the Hashem are getting killed. And as we learned before, the Bruri told him, and they told him that Chaytim, we want the sinners to just say Chatoim and not the Chaytim. And therefore, David's not happy when, even though he's punishing somebody who deserves punishment, David isn't necessarily is happy about that. So what does it mean? It says over there that the Abish is Ken Yossis Lahara as what does that mean? So he says, I'll bring another proof that the Abish is not happy when even the enemies get hurt. Forget about the people who deserve better. Even people deserve to be punished. It says I didn't approach each other the whole night. By the Yamsu, when he was standing there, he says, talked about something else altogether. The Malachim wanted to sing a shira when the Eden were about to cross the Yam. My creations are drowning in the Yam. Who am I? The Mitzrayim are about to drown. You want to sing a song? So the famous question of the astronomer says, but the Eden did. Eden sang Oz Yosher. The Eibush prevented the Malachim from singing a song when the Eden was saved, and yet the Eden were allowed to say, what's a chiluk? So the answer is, the astronomer says, the difference between a Malach and the Yid is, it says, when Malachim are referred to, they're very rigid, they're very fixed in their ways, they're only unidirectional. They have only one midah. They're chesed, they're good malach. They're good, they're good. Basheg and Ayid, we're a composite. We can have chesed and then 5 minutes later gvura. In fact, we can have them both concurrently. When you punish a child, it's chesed and gvura. You're punishing, but you're doing it for this out of love. We can mix emotions. We can cry and laugh at the same time. So Yidden are able to sing as Yosher. We are very happy that we were saved. And at the same time, we can feel a bit remorse that the entire nation had to be destroyed. Malachim doesn't have the capacity. If they're going to be singing a song, they don't have the capacity at the same time to feel any pain for the fact that Maisa Yodeh Tava B'Yam. There's another pshat that others want to say exactly the opposite. The Abish said, they should die like by Sanchedet. All the 108,000 soldiers, they died because they heard the Malachim sing and they all passed out. So the Malachim were saying, no, we'll sing and then the machine will die. But you have to go through the whole exercise, the rigmarole of crossing, of splitting the yam. So the Abish says, Maaseh Yodeh Tova B'Yam. These Mitzrayim took these little Jewish kids and threw them into the Nile, like we read in this week's Pasha, and they tried to destroy my nation. And all you want to do is sing a song and they should pass out like that? No, let them die in the Yamsuf. Exactly the opposite shot. Anyway, what we're trying to push about here, we're trying to prove that David does not rejoice when people are being harmed. So what does it mean in the Pasuk when it says, Ken Yossi Lahar ask him? David will be happy when he harms you. Who ain't a sus? Maces. David Taka is not happy when this happens, but others will be happy about this particular event because they are spared. So the Gemara, but they cannot prove it to you. The Chesiv, it says, Cain Yossis, he will make others happy. Like Chesiv Yosus, that he will be happy. I'm not that proves the point. He introduced the whole passage somewhere else. It says in the Pasuk, the Adam should tell you the fun of a person has good before him, Nasan Chachma V'das Simcha, because he gave over his understanding and his das wisdom and his joy. Then Mordechai Tzaddik is referring to Mordechai Hatzadik. And to the chayte, to the sinner, he gave him in your less so to go out there and gather together and gather together. Zeh is referring to Hama. Lost in the trade when they came to give good before the Abish said Mordechai Esther, the Chsiva Tosim Esther Mordechai al Beis Haman. Esther Mordechai replaced Haman and they took over everything from him. Rabbi Barai from Pasuk they introduced the entire story of Puri with the following pasuk. It says, "V'samti kisi be'elan." I will put my chair. in my throne in Elam, Valati, Misham, Melech, and I will destroy from there all these kings and these officers. Melech, which king was referring to? Zuvashti. And the Sodim, the Haman Vasaraban, because Vashti was killed, and then Haman Vasaraban was killed as well. He introduced the parsha from here, where it says, Ki avodi manachnu. We are avodim, u'avduseinu lo yazavun elokim. And while we were avodim, they should forsake us by yitel in the chesed malchei paras, and he enamored us to the kings of Paras. Amos, when did this whole thing happen? Bisman Haman. This is a pasuk is written in Sefer Ezra. And when did Abishter make us, wanted or desired? In the time of Haman, that we became favorites to the king. Okay, we will stop over here. So tomorrow, Thursday, we'll learn 8:30.